Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election.
Greetings. You are listening to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast with an exciting episode 3, or at least we think it'll be exciting. My name is Jason Miko, coming to you from the town of Oro Valley, Arizona, at the foot of the Catalina Mountains. It is just now 8 a.m., and we are recording this 8 a.m. my time. We're recording this on Thursday, December 6, 2018.
And this is Cvetin Chilimanov. I'm calling in from Skopje, the Republic of Macedonia, or whatever the country will be named in a little while. It's 4 in the afternoon here, so the toxic smoke we breathe here is now beginning to descend, and we're locking ourselves inside our homes and praying for the best.
It will always be Macedonia. Never North, always Macedonia.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What have you got? We're going to talk about migration in this episode, but before we get to that, I think we want to talk about some current topical news issues. Cvetin, I see that Prime Minister Zaev has created a bit of a firestorm with his remarks earlier this week, which were, of course, picked up by the Greek media, talking about the Aegean Macedonians and the Macedonian language and how the Macedonian language would be taught in Greece. The Greeks obviously learned about this. Apparently, Matt Nimitz has resurfaced. He's not dead yet.
Nope.
And so Nimitz, the name negotiator, had to get back into the fray and place a phone call apparently to Zoran Zaev and talk him down or scold him or whatever it is he did. And of course, what did Zaev do? Well, he backpedaled. And but still, I see some information this morning in one of the news agencies that the Greeks are now talking about an additional they call it an additional protocol, or perhaps an amendment to the so-called Prespa agreement, which will further limit the space and the ways in which Macedonians can actually say Macedonian language or Aegean Macedonians. What do you know on your end?
Yeah, this is a big issue, an Achilles heel of the whole treaty, which, if you allow me to use a Greek reference here, I don't know if it's still allowed. There will be no UN Security Council resolution which will solidify the name in the United Nations. We are not even asking for one because we expect Russia to block it after the referendum failed. So yeah, there are obviously, Greeks are aware of this, that Macedonia will be able to wiggle out of any future agreement. We may change the constitution, but we may be able to wiggle out of it at the implementation stage. And they will now be asking for additional guarantees because their basic guarantees are very weak. And Zaev was trying to sell the treaty to Macedonians who are concerned that this will hurt our national interests, and he was actually trying to be even more Macedonian than Vomero and Gruevski in the past. So he was, boisterously assuring Vomero members of parliament that vote for this deal, and it will allow us to finally get the right to have Aegean Macedonians, as we refer to them, educated in Macedonia and in Greece. And for those who do not know, there are at least tens of thousands of Macedonians living in Greece following the expulsions of the Balkan Wars and the Greek Civil War after the Greek Civil War. But there are still tens of thousands of them at least living in Greece. They have been forced to adopt Greek names. They have been banned from speaking in public squares. They can only speak at home. They're always hounded when they would try to set up like a media outlet in Macedonian, or even Facebook can get you in trouble. It's unimaginable to have public education in Macedonian. And we haven't even asked, we haven't even insisted on this because we know what the answer will be.
Right.
Usually the first step here would be to demand return of properties taken from expelled Aegean Macedonians and so forth, and none of this Greece would not move an inch on any of this. So Zaev was assuring members of parliament, saying, well, now with this treaty, we will do much more for the Aegean than any previous government, including the Gruevski government. We will ensure they can start now learning in Macedonia and at school. And obviously, this is at the core of the Greek issue with over Macedonia. They do not fear the name. They fear that a prosperous, successful Macedonian Republic of Macedonia, proper nation state of Macedonians, in one part of geographic Macedonia is going to serve as a guiding light for all other Macedonians in the region, especially those in Lerin, in Voden, in Kukush, in Solun, in all the cities in what is now northern Greece.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, I think the core issue, frankly, is that the Greeks deny that there is a Macedonian people, a Macedonian nation, a Macedonian language, and anybody who asserts that, obviously, you're right, they do fear that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they insist that they've only held this region for 100 years. It's an extremely short period of time, and when they took it over, it was mixed even with the majority Macedonian population, my type of Macedonian. And it was only after the Greek defeat in the war with Turkey in 1921 against Kemal Ataturk that hundreds of thousands of Greeks from modern-day Turkey were expelled from Turkey, and they were brought to Macedonia, which was a newly conquered region. So the Greeks would expel Macedonians from Macedonia, and they would settle Greeks expelled from Turkey, from the old cities of Smyrna and Pontiac, Pontus Greeks, etc. So they have a very shallow roots in the region, and they're aware of this. I mean, I often get into arguments with, a Greek who insists I'm originally Macedonian, but there is a member of European Parliament from Greece who says I'm Macedonian, Eva Kaili or something, and she lists both her parents as born, one in Istanbul, the other in Smyrna, whereas my great-grandfather was born in Kukush, in Macedonia, but she insists that she's Macedonian, whereas I'm not, which, makes very little sense.
Right. Well, you just got into some good history there, Cvetin, and I think kind of another news issue I noticed this week that I wanted to kind of lightly touch on was, so we've got the issue of the Prespa agreement between Greece and Macedonia. Obviously, there's a commission that's been established between the two governments to look at school books, textbooks, maps, atlases, teaching guides. The Greeks, of course, are going to insist the Macedonian school books change. But there's also an agreement with Bulgaria, the same thing. And there's a commission that's been established between the two governments to change Macedonian school books, textbooks, maps, atlases, teaching guides with respect to the Bulgarians. And the Bulgarians are going to demand that the Macedonian school books change. And I saw... I can't remember which media outlet it was, but Zoran Zaev basically said that some Macedonian school books and textbooks that refer to a, quote, Bulgarian fascist bullet, unquote, are not in the spirit of friendship with the Bulgarians. Well, the problem with that is that if you're going to base history, factual history, and try and reconcile that with wanting to have a spirit of friendship, those two things aren't going to work. History is history, and the Bulgarians were fascists, and if you want to call the bullets fascist, that's fine. A bullet's an inanimate object, but, quote, Bulgarian fascist bullet is a factual statement. And he wants to change that because he wants to be friends with the Bulgarians today. And you're going to see more of this, both with respect to the Bulgarians and the Greeks and Macedonian history and school books and textbooks.
Yeah, I mean, Zaev comes from the Social Democrat Party, the former Communist Party, which is, essentially founded as anti-Western, communist movement. But it has also fought against independent Macedonia. It was usually pro-Serbian in its past, pro-Yugoslav. Now it's apparently shopping for new owners or new patrons. But their one great, huge call to legitimacy was that they fought the Bulgarian army in World War II when Bulgaria occupied, after the Germans broke through the Yugoslav defenses, they gave this part of Macedonia from Yugoslavia, they gave it to Bulgaria. So they would, bore us incessantly about how they fought this relatively low-scale, irregular partisan fights with, again, not the prime fighting force of the of the Axis. They were fighting not very well trained Bulgarian forces, etc. But they would make this up to be like a huge deal, and there were like songs about a village where the Bulgarian soldiers would kill a few kids, youngsters, whatever. They would make like these elaborate monuments, etc. And songs including these references to the fascists. He died, so and so, our partisan friend. He died from this treacherous Bulgarian fascist bullet. And now the socialists, the same party, they now signed on to this agreement with Bulgaria, and they're going to eliminate what was their greatest call to legitimacy whenever they would, because they were not involved in the fight for Aegean Macedonia. They actually subverted it. They betrayed Macedonians in nowadays northern Greece. So that was a huge blemish, not a blemish, a huge black spot on their record. And they really we did not get an independent Macedonian nation state. We only got a rump, small statelet. So what was there for them to brag about? Well, we fought the Nazis and Bulgarians are Nazis. And then now they're completely backpedaling on this thing.
Wow. Well, that's quite a bit of history and good background information about the current party that's in leadership there, Citizen. What else do you have in the news that you want to talk about?
Well, we have this ostensibly, allegedly debate on amending the constitution. It's a constitutional requirement that you have to have a public debate, but it's such a ridiculous. Did you see that video of Katerina Kolozova that? She's like a lefty commentator, activist, daughter of a famous actress, etc. And she was invited to listen to Zoran Zaev, and as he is explaining, they're pretending to have a debate, and he's explaining the Prespa Treaty and how beneficial it is. And she's in favor, she's a supporter, but she's like sitting behind him and just like rolling her eyes out of her head. It's hilarious. Did you have a chance to see that?
No, I did not. Although I did see, I can't remember the name. There's this guy on Twitter that does cartoons. I think is it Cedo Pero or Cedo Pero?
Cedo Pero, yeah.
Yeah. I love the cartoons, and the one that he put out yesterday was a picture of the debate, I guess, in Parliament, and all of the debaters. It's Frčko, Frčkovski. So
the same person.
So, exactly. I thought it was hilarious. So yeah, you can't have a debate where only one side is present. That's not a debate.
Yeah, they're having debates, and I'm making quotation marks with my fingers here, between supporters alone. They're all supporters. And I actually had a funny event. I was just walking across the government, and I meet a constitutional law professor from the law faculty here, and a journalist friend of mine, and we all get together, and we spend like good 15 minutes debating the Constitution and what they're doing, and we are critical of it, obviously, of the proposals. Right. And we are in front of the government while they're debating inside, this circle jerk, in support of the. And we said, okay, well, here we are contributing to the debates. We gave 15 minutes of our lives to debate the Constitution.
Yes, well, I guess that counts as being from the other side, except that you weren't in the Parliament as part of the debate; you were outside of the Parliament. So
yeah, critics are not allowed to, access mass media. They would. There is even like a call to boycott these debates because it's pointless. At best, they would invite one critic, and they would give him or her like several minutes to speak, and all the rest are well-paid, politically connected supporters of the deal. So it's really pointless to debate this. Best, Kolozova did the best thing imaginable. She, with her eye rolling and head fakes and the grimaces she kept making is glorious.
Yeah. Speaking of Frčko, Cvetin, is it true? I just saw some breaking news here from Kanal Pet that Stoyan Andov, former Speaker of Parliament, claims that the former Prime Minister, President of Macedonia, Branko Crvenkovski, and former Foreign Minister Lubomir Frčko were behind the 1995 assassination attempt on President Kirill Gligorov. Is that true?
Fruchko is such a character. I mean, he was interior minister at the time and then foreign minister, and the number of scandals, of allegations of corruption, of horrible, just dreadful person altogether. Number of things that are being said about him is unbelievable. He was named by Gligorov at the time that he would actually, in Gligorov's memoirs no less, that he would come to his office bringing a suitcase full of money and offering him ancient Greek amphoras uncovered at some sunken boat or whatever, given to him by Greek intelligence if he could get Gligorov to support the name change. This is in the Gligorov memoirs. So it's absolutely no surprise that Andov is now claiming that Fruchkovsky knew, was informed, was involved, even organizing the 95 assassination attempt on Gligorov. And this is a person who the Social Democrats had as their presidential candidate in 2009. I mean, it's just beyond.
Wow. Well, in the words of Jeremy Clarkson,
what a pathetic specimen he is. Listen, is he going to lift?
And quick couple of housekeeping issues. We are working on creating a website for this podcast, so a dedicated page, as well as looking at Stitcher and some of the other feeds where most people get their podcasts so that we can put it on there. A couple of people have asked about that, and so those are two housekeeping issues we are working on. We promise to get those taken care of. At this point, I think we would normally say we're going to have a word from our sponsor, but right now we don't have any sponsors yet, but we're working on that. And if you would like to sponsor the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, we would love to hear from you. We have literally tens of listeners, I'm sure, that are listening to this on a weekly basis. We hope to get that number up so you can get your message out to the vast audience that we have that is growing. You can contact us. I think most people listening to this know you and me, Cvetin, through Facebook, Twitter, email, etc. So we'd love to hear from you on that.
There was just this Greek foreign ministry guy who was offering some money for us to shut up, but that's not appropriate commercial.
Yeah, no. Well, you're listening to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Our main topic this week is migration. Well, my goodness, migration. Of course, this is an issue, the whole issue of illegal immigration here in the United States. It's a big topic, has been a big topic for years, especially now with President Trump in office, and most recently with the so-called caravan at the border between Mexico and the United States. Just a couple of points real quick, Cvetin, I want to make. I want to offer my bona fides on the issue of refugees and dealing with migrants. I worked in Macedonia in the mid to late 90s and the early 2000s. First, mid to late 90s with Mercy Corps, a humanitarian group based in Portland, Oregon. And I was there during the Kosovo refugee crisis. So when I was with Mercy Corps, we managed one of the refugee camps. As you remember, Macedonia generously offered shelter to almost 360,000 refugees coming in from Kosovo during that time. We managed the Sinakos refugee camp, and so we spent a lot of time working with refugees at the camp as well as with others, working with the government, UN, and others to make sure that they were taken care of. Of course, fortunately for the refugees, fortunately for Macedonia, as soon as everything was over, they went back home. Second point, I'm Hungarian, as I like to point out. My great-grandfather came over here to the United States with his young son, my grandfather, in the early 1900s. They left the old country, and they came here, and my great-grandfather wanted to become an American. He wanted to assimilate. So my grandfather and his sisters, my great-aunts, all spoke Hungarian at home as they were growing up. But they all integrated. They all became Americans. And I think that's one of the important points about those that we want to offer a chance to come over here and make a life, is that they have to want to assimilate and become Americans. And I think it's important to point out that every country has the right to control its borders and to control who comes in and who doesn't come in. And what we're seeing going on at the southern border right now is this so-called caravan that has started, I think, in Central America, and it's picked up refugees. There's refugees there from all over the world, is my understanding. And you see the images of especially a lot of the young men that are, charging the border, the wall, trying to get in without actually going through the process of applying for asylum, if they're applying for asylum, but are trying to disregard the rules that we have as a nation to simply, come into the country illegally. Obviously, every country in the world has the right to control its borders, and as compassionate as humans, we want to be compassionate about those who are legitimately in need of asylum or refugee status. Economic migration is another issue. And as we saw in Europe in 2015, and as we see today in Europe and other places, so many of those trying to get into Europe, the United States, etc., are simply fleeing horrible economic circumstances in their home countries. They're economic migrants, and they do not have a right to just come into this country or into European countries because their economic situation at home is a shambles. The number one issue that we can, the best way that we can help them is to tell their home countries, heal thyself.
I mean, as you said, we have experience here with refugees and migrants. Also, we had Macedonia accepted this huge number of war refugees from Kosovo, and then 2 years later, Kosovo turned around and attacked Macedonia, which again goes to show you that no good deed goes unpunished. And and then our second major experience was with in 2015, 2016 when what was the latest estimate? Like over 1 million people crossed the Greek-Macedonian border when Greece just threw up its hands and said, we cannot control this thing. We are just going to ferry them as quickly as we can from the islands close to Turkey to the Macedonian border. And, we handled it, I guess we handled it professionally, since the border was open to the north. Germany was receptive, was welcoming. So, who are we to stand in their way? We were obviously, organizing the movement as quickly and as humanely as possible. Obviously, it was never going to end if Germany remained open. And once they decided to close the border, that's when we had all this caravan-style situations, when our police had to fire tear gas to practically protect the external border of the European Union, which had, tried to turn on a dime and, completely alter its border policy overnight, essentially. And we did this as well. We built a wall, we built, a border fence, etc. What annoys me extremely, and we have a lot of this now, this, like fawning and kind of like humorous comments from the left now that Nikola Gruevski, the guy who actually built this fence and who actually stopped the migrant crisis and saved the careers of a number of, centrist European politicians like Angela Merkel, when he himself had to eventually flee the country, faced with, I would say unprecedented, but unfortunately it's not unprecedented, it's very precedented, political persecution for this country. He claimed political asylum in Hungary, and he was promptly given one. And they said, oh, look, he's trying to, he closed the border for asylum seekers, but now he wants asylum for himself. Well, this is exactly what asylum means. It means you pick a number of individuals from a messed up country, and Macedonia is currently a very messed up country, and you give them asylum in a country which is open or welcoming to their political points of view. We had this with Dragan Bogdanovsky, the founder of modern-day Vimera, who was kidnapped by the Yugoslav communist secret police in Paris and driven across Europe to be sentenced to 11 years in prison in Macedonia by the communist authorities because he wanted an independent Macedonia and a free market-oriented Macedonia and a pro-Western Macedonia. And he eventually received political asylum in Sweden. Or Blagoje Šambevski, who worked as an economic migrant / political asylum seeker or recipient in Germany and was killed there by Yugoslavian communist intelligence. So this is exactly what asylum is. In any country which has this type of problems, like Macedonia, the size of Macedonia, you have about 100 people who are legitimate political asylum seekers, who are legitimately being threatened with their life, property, or freedom because of their political activism, and who, if given a chance and when circumstances develop as they change, could come back and lead the country toward democracy, toward pluralism and respect for human rights, exactly like Dragan Bogdanovsky did. And these are asylum seekers which, you can count them, they would not affect the livelihood of a country, of the recipient country. I mean, all of the persecuted people in Macedonia would feel like 2 apartment buildings in Budapest. It's nothing. On the other hand, refugees are a different beast. There are a much greater number of people, like the hundreds of thousands of Kosovars who were fleeing in '99. And here, different rules apply. They have to be housed in the nearest country to their country of origin because it's most economical, and you're always hoping to return them.
Yeah, no, they have to be housed in the first country of entry if it's considered a safe country. And in the case of 2015, that was Greece, Italy, EU countries there that are on the Mediterranean.
Yeah, sure. But if we're speaking Syrians, I mean, the nearest countries are obviously Turkey, Saudi Arabia. You also have to bear in mind cultural compatibilities. Obviously, an Sunni Arab fleeing the Assad regime from Syria, he would, I imagine, be relatively welcome at home in Saudi Arabia, I guess. A vast country, sparsely populated, with enormous wealth. Why would he be sent to Germany? I mean, I don't understand this. What's the point of this unless German socialist parties are shopping for new voters further down the road, which is what American left-wing parties are also
actually
doing.
you bring up a very good point. Yeah, both here and over in Europe, a lot of folks from both the political right and the political left are very interested in. For the political left, obviously here in America, it is they want open borders. They want anybody to come in so that they can have new Democrats. Now, for their blame goes to the right as well. Big business over here is interested in low cost labor, and so they have committed their own sins in terms of ignoring the issue of illegal immigrants in this country because they simply want low wage labor. Now, I think Europe Europe also is interested in that low wage labor, and to a large degree, I think it's because that Europe is facing a demographic deficit, also facing a democratic deficit, but a demographic deficit because, quite simply, Europeans in many European countries, especially EU countries, people aren't having children. That or they're either killing them in the womb through abortion, and so because they're refusing to have children or they're aborting them, they don't have the population that's needed to do unskilled labor jobs and low wage labor jobs, and so they feel that they must bring in these workers from other countries. And okay, fine, but the folks that you bring in have to want to assimilate and become a part of the culture. And we see, especially in places like Sweden, where they just aren't. And there are certain no-go zones in Sweden. Bradford, England is another one. Germany, we can name all kinds of examples where the immigrants that have come in just don't want to assimilate, and they want to impose their culture on the host country. And that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, obviously the welfare state, because I was for 2 years in the U.S., like kind of like sort of like a migrant, and I lived in a neighborhood.
You were here legally though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was very easy actually. It was being offered. It was a piece of cake getting the social security number, which only later I understood is basically the only thing you need to get a job in the U.S. Even though I was on a no work visa in the U.S., but. They were this was the Obama years, so I guess they were just giving these things at the airport or something. And I was offered to vote. People offered to register me to vote.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was Virginia, hotly contested territory. And I told the recruiter, well, yeah, but I'm not a citizen. And, the follow-up question was not, the answer was not, okay, fine, thank you. It was, yeah, but do you have like a driver's license or something? And only when I said, yeah, but I would vote Republican, and only that's when she gave us.
They said, move along. No, you can't register. So.
Good thing she didn't call the police on me. That was great.
Yeah. Who was actually asking you to register? Was it an organization or?
I was going to some university to interview somebody, and this was like, you can imagine the type of people which sit around university.
Well, the university, yeah. Okay, we know. So, yeah.
And once they tried to do the same thing in Starbucks to recruit me in Starbucks. But the impression I got, and I lived for a short while in Western Europe, slightly longer in the States, and the difference which I saw is that there is still a much less developed welfare state in the U.S., and this helps immigrants integrate, because they have to learn the language, because they have to work, because if they don't work, they would literally be left to die on the street. I mean, not to die, but they would face horrible. It would not be picnic for them. In the U.S., if you are trying to live on welfare, while in Europe, this softer, more socialist type of living actually, prevents the integration of migrants, because they don't have to work. They will at some point get some kind of government subsidized housing. Some type of food stamps, etc. And Macedonians who would immigrate in the U.S. in the 20s, in the 30s, there was a large wave, and they would say, where are you going to go? I mean, are you going to the mine or to the line? And it meant, are you going to work in the car factories, or are you going, to dig for coal or something? They were very aware that they will not be going there for some easy living. They would go there to work, and they would have to learn the language and integrate and learn the ropes.
And they did it for their children. They knew that life, when they first came here from the old country, like my great grandfather, they knew that it was going to be hard for them, and they weren't doing it for them. They were doing it for their children, to give their children an opportunity, a better life. One quick example. I was just in San Francisco this past weekend visiting an elderly aunt and uncle. And my aunt is my mom's sister, so we're related by blood. My mom's sister, my aunt, married her husband, my uncle, whose father came from Lebanon and settled in West Virginia. And his name, when he was born in Lebanon, my uncle's father, was Abdullah Mahana. And when he got to West Virginia, he changed his name to Albert Mahan. and he and his wife raised 3 boys. The oldest went into the Air Force. The middle one, my uncle, became a very successful lawyer. And the youngest became a Lutheran minister. Whoa. But the point is, and they were Antiochian Orthodox over in Lebanon. They came here, they integrated, they assimilated, and they gave their children, my uncle and his 2 brothers, a chance at success, and they became successful, and their children, my cousins, and that's what it's about for when you are a migrant, whether you're whether you come into the country legally, or if it's asylum or refugee status or whatever, you're going there to provide a better life for your children.
Yeah, and there is also a proud, confident country has this sort of gravitational pull, and I felt this in Virginia. I would catch myself humming to local songs and doing stuff that locals do, and I still I'm like on Dixie Outpost here in Skopje, where I sometimes do smoked ribs, Dixie style, or stuff like that. But you have to be culturally confident to do this. Now, big chunks of America are no longer projecting their own lifestyle and values and culture. This is it's a funny thing. It's the cuisine of the country, but through it you also get the way you accept the way you treat women. You accept the way you drive. I mean, I was amazed how courteous people were in their car, just driving down the street, and it was, a very good thing to adopt. Now in Europe, they're so culturally, they've basically reproached themselves for having a culture of their own. So you do not have this type of gravitational pull, and it's a recipe for disaster. They're encouraging migrants to preserve their culture, including some very unsavory things such as female genital mutilation, honor killings, etc. And it's and another thing that exceptionally annoys me, they're bastardizing these terms which are honorable and should be preserved as principles. I mean, I mentioned asylum seeking, so they're now saying, oh no, well, a political asylum procedure should apply to all million people who have fled Syria, even though 0.1%. You could say that they were politically active, wrote something, did a political graffiti, or protested or whatever, and the rest were just like normal people who are of course fleeing the war, but have no cause to seek political asylum, but they're just going to crowd the system, just like Macedonians did this. They would go to oftentimes Romas from Macedonia, but all sorts actually. They would go to Belgium or Germany and they would apply for economic asylum, and because this is a long protracted procedure, and they're bastardizing the principle of rescue at sea, because they would deliberately prepare a boat in Morocco now, previously in Libya. They would set sail for Italy, now Spain, and then like several kilometers off the coast they would demand rescue at sea because of alleged engine trouble. Now, in coordination with usually an NGO funded left-wing, funded rescue boat. So in technically they have the right. I mean, there is a law that you have to help people at sea who are in trouble, and you have to take them to the nearest safe country, not Libya, but Malta. But if Malta is too small, then let's go to Italy. So they're looking.
Italy, agreed.
So much energy has gone into looking for these loopholes in existing laws to make them apply to the whole continent of Africa, whereas these laws have been put in place for when a cruise ship capsizes or a fishing boat runs into trouble.
Right.
And I don't know, they're you cannot mess with principles such as borders, such as helping a person in need on the open sea, such as a war refugee. But there are principles that he needs to be housed safely, but economically, close to home, in a culturally appropriate environment.
Right.
I mean, we see the consequences for the European countries.
Right. Well, I think we can agree that certainly speaking for the United States of America, our immigration policy is quite complex, complicated, and very screwed up. It needs to be refined, dealt with, changed, and the parties can't agree on that. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think over in Europe, you've had this debate about immigration in general. And that is still going on. The EU is demanding, of course, that certain countries, that all EU countries take in a certain number of refugees. The countries are claiming sovereignty, which they are, and saying that they don't want to do that. And that's something that Europe is going to be dealing with for quite a long time, I think. Yeah,
the natives no longer vote for the left-wing parties, so they want to import a new people, like Bertolt Brecht foretold.
Yeah.
It's incredible, and it's amazing to behold.
Yeah. Well, I think we could talk about immigration, legal and illegal, and refugees and asylum and all that all day long. I think we're running a little bit long here, but I understand, Cvetin, that you have some breaking news.
Yes, I have stepped into it again while we were recording this. Apparently, he said that neither he or his children will ever be Northern Macedonians, and this is another contentious issue with the Greeks.
Well, that's gonna tick off the Greeks.
Absolutely. And then there are other. I mean, we actually need to move this podcast into twice weekly because there are so many things happening. There is a long-term activist on the right. He's claiming that there are recordings of Zaev, which will impact his political career, similarly to the recordings which were being published on Nikola Gruevski and which caused his downfall. So there is one thing to look forward to in the coming days.
Well, Yeah, well, in the words of Jeremy Clarkson,
It's brilliant.
And there is another horrible situation happening in Corfu, and which, this is basically the Balkans in a nutshell. We have, there is a person called Petrit Zilfi, an elderly gentleman, 63, Albanian citizen, still unsure whether he's ethnic Macedonian from Albania or, Albanian, who lived in Corfu. There is a lot of, people from Albania living there, who got into a fight 2 weeks ago with some Greek neo-Nazi nationalists from this Golden Dawn party in a bar in Lefkimi, they were apparently arguing over the Macedonian name, and the Greeks got out and shot him with a shotgun and threw his body in a ditch. This is like the fourth of the fifth murder between Greece and Albania. 4 Albanians and 1 Greek have been killed in back and forth attacks over several weeks, and this one was over the Macedonian name issue, apparently.
Wow, that is sad, and they're going to have to get a handle on that. Otherwise, things are going to get out of control between the Greek government and the Albanian
I
government.
was just in Corfu this summer, and this is so far from Macedonia. I didn't imagine there is going to be any anger over this issue. Normally, Greeks are more relaxed the further away you get from Macedonia, but still, we got into some shouting and arguments over the issue. So, actually, the Prespa Treaty is actually making things worse between us, if at all possible.
Well, yeah, no, I think we both have predicted that is going to continue, and it will get worse.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go to our, as we're calling them, our farmers' picks of the week. And I want to give a shout out to a friend of mine, Mario Hristovsky. He is an American, but born in Bitula, lives and works in Ohio, and he has created on YouTube what he calls Mario's History Talks. And I think he's up to 8 episodes now. And he just, they're very short, 7, 8, 10 minutes long, fun little videos, and where he talks about Macedonian history. He's not afraid to take on especially our Greek and Bulgarian friends, but they're very educational. They're fun. They're funny. And so I just want to give a shout out to Mario Hristovsky and Mario's History Talks on YouTube. You can just plug in Mario's History Talks in a YouTube search bar, and you'll find them and enjoy them.
Yeah.
What are your what's your farmer's pick?
Well, yeah. I mean, this has been a tough week or 10 days for culturally speaking for Macedonia. We lost a number of great people. We lost Goran Stefanovski, the famous playwright, and brother of even more famous Vlatko Stefanovski, the guitarist. We lost actor Grozdanov. We lost Blaže Ristevski, the famous promoter of Macedonian history. He was a literary historian, and obviously now he has issues with his daughter switching sides politically and supporting the Zaev proposal to rename the country, which is, another insight into how deeply and how emotionally things are for Macedonia. And ultimately today we lost Ljubiša Georgievski, the famous director and playwright. Yeah. He was supposed to be our first democratically elected president, but the elections, he ran against Gligorov in '94, but there was a lot of, how shall we say, indecency in those elections, and so he was a dissident in Yugoslav times. Then he was appointed as Speaker of Parliament, and one of his movies, The Republic in Flames, which covers the story of the Ilindan uprising in Kruševo. I see it's on YouTube available, so I would encourage everybody out there to have a look. And it stars Risto Shishkov, the legendary actor and dissident who was imprisoned by the communists for speaking against the communist regime and against Marshal Tito. So this would be my pick for the week.
Well, that's a bit of a down note, but I think it's important to remember. You just mentioned 3 or 4 individuals from the cultural sphere, and how important it is to remember Macedonia's history and culture and to promote that. Hopefully, regardless of what happens with the so-called Prespa agreement, Macedonians in the Republic and everywhere else will continue to learn history, tell their children about Macedonian history, support the culture of Macedonia in every way, shape, and form. So it is sad to see to lose a number of cultural icons from Macedonia, but that is the way it goes. Cvetin, it has been great talking with you as always. I think we'll do this next week. We'll have to figure out what our topic is, and perhaps see about getting guests on as well at some point.
Yeah, we can invite Mario at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll do that, and we'll look at other things like that. And kind of, this is a niche podcast in and of itself, of course, but other folks are doing these types of things, and we want to do what we can to promote that. So again, as always, great to talk to you. You've been listening to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Cvetin, it's been great talking to you.
It's a small niche podcast based on named after an inside joke, and we appreciate all the tens of listeners we got there.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us, folks.
И од црвени линии, и дека ќе бидеме насочени кон решение, кон компромис. И дојдовме до решение. Тогаш кога сите тврдеа дека тоа е невозможно, денес сите заедно гледаме дека е возможно, заедно ги живееме и овозможуваме овие историски моменти за нашата земја. С приоритети, наши државни и национални, и да донесеме одлука која што верувам младите и идните генерации ќе ја имат како одлука за паметење. Сите заедно треба да ја овозможиме на државата напредок, да ја овозможиме членство во Европската унија и во надвор од договорот од Преспа. Ево духот на договорот од Преспа, односно е согласно договорот од Преспа, но представува постепена примена кој што на еден начин тоа ќе ни го гарантира. Секако предлогот за влегувањето во сила, но еден дел од сугестиите кои што ги дадоа на чувството кое што го имат тие, а опишано во преамбулата, која што кај нив како помалку бројни етнички заедници и тие како пратеници негуваат, што е самиот нејзин почеток. Имаме осврт кој што вели граѓаните немаат проблем. Тоа е наше право на самоопределување. Тоа е идентитетско прашање и тоа ниеден договор не го опфаќа и немаме проблем со оваа работа. Секако плюс е потврдено и преку македонскиот јазик е најмногу бројна во Република Македонија. Се надевам дека дебатата ќе биде до крај приемчива, но на крајот да не испадне дека лечиме комплекси, па на крајот докажувајќи го тоа нашиот идентитет да забегаме во некоја друга крајност, и затоа треба да бидеме одмерени. Јас сум окей, грчката страна нема проблем со вакви прашања, кои што државјанството да се прецизира во уставниот законник,